How's it going? It's been a while since the last video, and what I'm going to do today is go over a general update on the state of the game. Then I will deep dive into the problem solving of two different situations that I had with some mechanics, and then finish off talking about a mechanic that I had to cut and why I had to cut it. For the general update, since the last video, it's been a lot of bug fixing and basic polish. It's been a lot. I've made new mechanics, I've changed some systems and stuff like that. Still, a lot of bug fixing and a lot of enhancing existing mechanics with some minor polish. So, all of this started when I tested the game on my girlfriend's laptop. One of the consistent failures that will show up in pretty much each of these stories is that we have not play tested the game enough. As such, I've never played the game on anything other than my own monitor, which has great colors, 24.5 inches, 144 hertz. So I recognized that, and so I decided to play on my girlfriend's, pretty average, normal 13-inch laptop. The experience was different, to say the least. So the list that I'm putting on screen isn't even everything that I wrote, as by the time I'd taken the screenshot, so much of it had already been fixed, or I just removed some redundancies. Even so, you can see my increasing frustration with how bad some of it was. The lighting was terrible. I couldn't properly tell what was going on. I found multiple bugs along the way, but I also found that the game was way too fast and everything was way too small. So while playing, I would game over very, very quickly and not even realize it because the damage feedback was so insubstantial. And so that was the test that led me to focusing on bug fixes and polishing. I slowed the game down, I made projectiles bigger, I zoomed in the camera so that everything could be seen better, I increased the feedback, altered lighting, and alongside a bunch of other changes, all of this made the game feel phenomenally better to play. Even without much new content, simply doing all these fixes made the experience of playing the game much more fun and understandable. With all that fixing comes the next story, and as bug fixing goes, I would go fix one problem, and then I would find 5 more, and within each of those 5, I would find 5 more. So the bug that I just finished, God, I hope I've just finished fixing it. It took me all week of my dev time, and it has to do with the input system. So during the game, you go from combat rooms into this sort of market hub-like area. And so within the hub, you're not allowed to shoot. By chance, I discovered that if you hold down or spam fire when going from the combat room into the hub, the player will fire before the room disables it, and that will crash the game. I thought I had fixed this ages ago, like at the very beginning, but here we are. So it became a long process of trying to pause the player's ability to input at every possible stop. So, putting in these if statement checks to try to check if firing is activated or deactivated, making all these different variables that would be true or false and try to cut it off wherever it could. I tried creating a new Unity input system action map, which is pretty much just like a set of control actions, and within those actions it did not include firing at all, and then changing over to that action map when the scene changed. I would try calling X thing here rather than there, things in different orders, more bool statements on every single strand within the code. I did a lot. And then I found out that it happens when the player spawns into the hub after you select the character on character select. So after a lot of pain, I finally narrowed it down to being because of Unity's execution order. So according to their chart, player input comes before the actual normal game logic. Once I figured this out, I tried doing all sorts of tricks with the execution order to try to turn firing off before input was registered, such as using the onEnable function. For whatever reason, none of that worked. I'm not sure why, but how I've finally solved it, God, I really hope I solved it, is not by some intricate programmer surgery where I work the walls of Unity to try to delicately and precisely disable it in just the right way. I just took a club to it and bashed it. It does the job just as well, and even this has its own story to it. So how it was working was I was trying to trigger the deactivation of the player being able to fire when the player enters the door that leads into the hub. So once they enter that trigger, I would try to deactivate player fire. So my new solution was to try to deactivate it before the player enters the door. So my first approach was a runway of sorts. So when you enter that door, think of it like a big carpet in front of the door. It would disable firing at a minimum multiple frames before the door was entered. And so that worked great until I tried to dash into the door. So the speed of the dash was so fast that it goes through the trigger that disables firing without registering that it went through the trigger, and the problem would still happen. It was very niche, but it crashes the game and I could see it happening, and so that needed to be fixed. And so what was my next solution? I could have performed intricate programmer surgery on the club, but instead what I chose to do was get a bigger club, one with spikes on it. And so how the flow of the game works is that when you enter a room, it is in a combat state. The lights are on, the music is blasting, and enemies are attacking you. And the moment that all the enemies are destroyed is when the room enters its second state. So the lights sort of flick on and off, and the second state, all the lights are dimmed, the music is turned off, visual features of the room change, and sounds from the environment can be heard. Sort of like you're in a abandoned stadium or like you're in a store when they're not open. So I decided to lean into the narrative component of this solution. And so now when all the enemies are destroyed and the room snaps to its second state, that is when firing is disabled. So with this solution, it allows the player to engage more deeply in the atmosphere of the space that we're trying to create, while it also adds this narrative mystery for why can the weapons just be turned off when the show is over, so to speak. The other times that it comes up, like with character select, had their own fight that I had to do and it took a while, but the specific solution for utilizing the narrative as an excuse of types was a more fun story. And so this could be a time where people can do that whole, Reddit YouTuber lazy game developers rant, and sure, whatever. I actually think this solution enhances the game more than the other ones though, and just because it's lazier doesn't mean that it's worse. And this whole thing took me about 8 to 10 hours to fix, which in the scope of bug fixing isn't tons, but when you only work part-time on the game as a hobby, that's a lot of hours that could have gone to other work. So now what are the changes that we've made and changes that we are in the process of trying to figure out? So Eric and I met up physically for the first time in a while, and we had a meeting that focused on the tool system. So this tool system has been our biggest sticking point for the past while, and it's been our roadblock to putting together an actual playtest demo. That's another failure as far as planning and production goes, and I'm still learning from that. It's a personal failure of mine as well, since I would focus so much on trying to make stuff. Since I've made so much of it, I've neglected the higher level production side and prototyping phase far more than I should. Regardless, the tool system has been in a limbo where we each have different ideas of how to implement it. So I always imagined it as a general pool that the player can select from, and it's up to them to find synergies, while Eric imagined it more like a hero shooter where each class has specific tools that they can select from. And both of these options are correct, but we were motionless till we made a decision. This is where the changes get involved. So firstly, we've decided to take it from one ability to two abilities. So we wanted to improve the capacity to create interesting synergies and have more dynamic gameplay and economy decision making. And production wise, I still haven't made this. I was about to until I found that crash bug that I just went over. And this second ability will be quite difficult to add because one ability is so hard coded into the game, but it will be worthwhile, so I will embrace that struggle. The second change is about how tools are used. So, how they have been working this entire time is that they operate on a cooldown, like in a hero shooter. You use it, you have to wait X amount of seconds for it to be available again. What we've now introduced is that some tools have ammo per room, so rather than being constrained by a cooldown, these ones are constrained by amount of uses per room. At the moment, some of them work based on a cooldown and some of them work based on ammo, so having different ones work on different things will make the decision space a bit more interesting for the player. At least we think. We still have to playtest that. There it is again. So this is where our next major sticking point that we still haven't solved arrives. How do we keep the player interested in coming back to the tool shop to buy more? So the player always stops at the hub between floors, and we don't want the player to just pick the first tool that they like and stick with it the whole run. Or even if they do, there still needs to be something that keeps the economy and the tool side of the game developing over the course of the run. And we do have a few ideas for how to fix this, such as one of mine being a subscription system where you rent out tools. And the more that you rent them, the more that they start to cost. It becomes a game of juggling the economy with what you can get or what you want to spend the money on with your confidence. And a few other ideas are like rarity based or an item like system where rather than tools having ammo per room, tools have ammo per floor, and every time you go back to the shop, you have to restock. Another one is where rather than the player having a stock, the store has a stock, and if you keep using one tool, they will run out of stock of that, and they can get stock back later, but you have to wait for it, so you have to like pick and choose based upon how much stock is left, how much it costs, stuff like that, or really just a simple upgrading system that upgrades its attributes. So these are just some of the ideas, and I like a lot of them. Some of them are easier to develop than others, and I'm not looking to adapt some solution that takes 8 months to develop due to its complexity. And I think what we're going to do is we're going to try to run the playtest before we make the decision so that we can see where the holes in the system actually are based on feedback, and then we have more data to make that decision based on. And now, finally, what about that mechanic that we abandoned? So, slowing down time is always cool in games, either as like a mechanic like in Max Payne or Fear, which I both really need to replay, and or as just a way to enhance feedback, such as a brief slowdown when the player gets hit or when the enemy is destroyed, just to sort of enhance the feel of the game. And so since it's cool and does all those things, I wanted to use it. So the first place I made it was at the very beginning of this game's development as a tool where you can slow down time. So I made this at the very beginning, and it seemed like everything worked fine. And so the second place that I did recently is where I found the problem. So as detailed in that first section with running the test on my girlfriend's laptop, the feedback for being damaged was absolutely abysmal, just a flaccid screen shake. And I wanted to remedy that, and so I worked up a few ideas. The first one being that when you get hit, the camera zooms in, and it does give a stronger sense of visual feedback while getting you directly into the space of what happened. It works great, and I enjoy how it feels. The second is that I tried to add a slowdown on getting hit that lasts for the entire time that the player is invincible. It worked great, and it felt impactful, and the slowdown meshed really well with the zoom, and it gets you into that headspace of like, what just happened? Let me get out of here into a better position. And I also made this really fun mechanic that I wanted to use as a passive for a class where if an enemy or a bullet was within a radius of the player, the game would slow down, sort of like a super reflexes passive. I got it working, and honestly, it was a lot of fun, and all was well and good until I came upon some interesting problems that Unity's timescale has with coroutines. So I could be incorrect in this, but my testing and research points me in this direction. So A lot of my code operates on coroutines, which are functions that rather than being run in like line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 specific order, you can run it on line 1, it'll be put to the side, and it has some parameter. The one that I usually use is wait for seconds. So you run it on line 1, it waits for X number of seconds until it runs while all the other stuff keeps going at its normal in its normal order. And so things that have it are like reload, tool cooldowns, bunch of enemy functions. It's not tons and tons of stuff, but it's a good collection of important stuff. And so the problem, simply put, is that the normal time scale is 1. And so that means that 1 in-game second takes 1 real-time second. Going down to 0.5 time scale means that 1 in-game second takes 2 real-time seconds, and going up to time scale of 2 means that 1 in-game second takes 0.5 real-time seconds. And so with that foundation established, if you engage a coroutine at time scale X, it will do its countdown at that originally set time scale, even if the time scale were to change during its countdown. So that sentence probably doesn't make sense, and so to illustrate it with some big numbers and an example, let's say that it takes 10 seconds to reload a weapon. You reload at time scale 1, it takes 10 seconds. Let's say that you get hit and the time scale goes down to 0.1. So 1 in-game second takes 10 real seconds. That would mean at time scale 0.1, the 10-second reload would take 100 real seconds. Now let's say you reload at a time scale of 0.1, the frame before the time scale goes back to 1. And so rather than the, countdown coroutine accounting for this in its calculations, it sticks with taking 100 real-time seconds. And reloading really was the final straw that made me cut that mechanic. Once I had figured all that out, I had made a lot of concessions here and concessions there, but reloading and tool cooldowns were so core that I could not make concessions for them or figure out ways to stop that carryover from happening. Because the carryover would happen from slow to faster or from faster into slow. So either way, the timing was completely messed up. And it took a lot of time to get to that point of cutting it, but I had to weigh the sacrifice. Is it worth spending ridiculous amounts of time refactoring the game logic and then fixing all the problems that would stem from refactoring those problems just for one minor mechanic? For this one, no. It was a cool idea, but not integral to the vision in the slightest. You could make another lazy game dev claim, but there is a point where the reality is that real people are spending real time trying to make something that they want to come out in a realistic time, and this mechanic won't be what saves the game if the rest of it is bad. I'm willing to go back into the trenches for the 2-tool system because that is important and that is integral to the game. But this is just a side thing. I'm not cutting slow time from Max Payne or Fear. I'm not cutting Mario's Jump. I'm cutting some random ability on a skill tree that can be replaced with another random ability on a skill tree. It still is a shame. I liked how it played and it felt kind of like a waste of work, but I learned a lot from it, and it was a continual reminder, as everything I work on this game is, about the sort of value of planning design structures in advance. Not that everything can be predicted, but man, when for everything that I have set up for modularity comes in, it's so easy to make additions and changes and add stuff, and it's so nice. But to round that out, to tell you what I did do to end up help selling it, this might not be all of it, or maybe it is, I'm not sure. We might add like a hit indicator, but to help sell it right now, I added this chromatic aberration to the camera when you get damaged, and I actually like it quite a lot, and I actually like it more than the slowdown. It helps sell the player that they've been hit sort of like they've been hit in the head, like in a cartoon where they'll have stars and birds floating around their heads. This one's sort of like you got hit in the head. You get hit so hard that now color refraction in your eyes isn't working properly. And I think it does feel nice. And there might still be something that we add, like a actual like sprite hit indicator, but for now I really like how this feels. And so at the end, where does this leave us at? Well, I'm hoping that we will have some friends test the game soon. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make the 2-tool system, and I'm hoping that it'll be easier than I think, but it might end up being pretty rough. The input system error already had me mumbling, and I'm also hoping to make another video sooner than later. But as you can tell by this video, both in how it's been produced and how long it's been since my last one, I'm focusing on making the game first and foremost. Otherwise, have a great day. So, also,